This is in continuation with the video that was recorded on channel 9, where we demonstrated the MusicStore application. And you can see the architecture of this application. It was built using .NET 3.5, essentially originally built with Visual Studio 2010. And then we had talked about a number of challenges like the pinvoke library, the WCF MSMQ, and things like that. And this is what the architecture looked like at that point. So originally the application was an on-premises application running on some VMware system, and it is comprised of one monolithic tier and then one database tier. And then in the previous version of this video, we had converted that into containers and Kubernetes, but at that point, the Windows nodes for Kubernetes were not available. So we'll recall that our architecture looks something like on the right-hand side. We had AKS, and then we used the virtual kubelet capability to instantiate an Azure container instance where our Windows-based containers were located. So since the recording of that video in March, Kubernetes 1.14 has come out with support for Windows nodes. So we thought it would be interesting to upgrade this application, and instead of hosting our pods in ACI, move those pods directly into a Windows node pool inside AKS. As I mentioned earlier, with the advent of Kubernetes version 1.14, which is supported by AKS now, we have the ability to host Windows nodes inside Kubernetes. And if you're wondering what has changed, what changes were made in Kubernetes or Windows to enable that, I'd like to point you to this page which describes a number of release notes here. For example, if I go down this page, and this page, of course, as you can see on the top, is hosted on kubernetes.io. And this page talks about how Windows container support was added, what compute functionality supported. So as you can see on this table, for Kubernetes 1.14, the only supported version of Windows is Windows Server build 1809, Windows Server 2019. Now what this means for us is, since we are running a .NET 3.5 application, it really doesn't matter to us. We were able to run this application on Windows Server 29. But if that is not the case, if you have some dependence on the previous version of the operating system for some reason, then you would have to, of course, look at this. So this page here gives us a good idea about the supported capabilities. And if I further go down, it talks about the networking and what are some of the limitations around Windows containers inside AKS. Of course, it uses CNI plugins. So for most parts, your Kubernetes manifests are going to remain the same. And the key change to note, if you're wondering what is the key change here and why weren't the Windows containers, as they were announced as Windows Server 2016, just work with Kubernetes, the way to think about this is when Windows container support was announced in 2016, it was designed to work mainly with Docker and Docker Swarm. And as you know, in Docker, the networking and storage is largely coupled to the Docker engine. And in Kubernetes, that is not the case because the storage and networking is offloaded and decoupled and in fact handled by something called the kubelet. So as you can imagine, changes to the Kubernetes spec, Windows and Docker, all three were needed to make this support possible. So I'm inside my Azure portal, and we are in the resource group, the MC_resource group, which we had talked about earlier. And the only interesting thing to note here is that I have two virtual machine scale sets. So here's the Windows one right here and the Linux one. So let's just click on the Windows node here and discuss us information about the Windows node. Probably a more interesting portal to look at is the Kubernetes portal itself. So let me bring that up. So here's the Kubernetes portal. and we are inside the MusicStore namespace. And let's take a quick look at here are our two nodes. And let's just take a quick look. So this is the Windows node right here. And if you look at all of the pods that are running on this node, if I go further down, these are all of the pods that we had previously instantiated on ACI. And as you can see, they are directly being instantiated inside the Windows node of our AKS cluster right here. And the last thing I want to show you here, of course, is the application itself. So this is the MusicStore application, and we have brought it up. I won't go into the functionality, but it is the same functionality as we had implemented in the previous version. So I can come in, select an item, add to a cart, and all of the usual functionality that we had previously demonstrated. So this is a very quick video to show you how, with the advent of the Windows support inside Kubernetes and AKS, we have even greater flexibility in bringing Windows applications and hosting these applications inside Kubernetes. Hope this is helpful. Thank you.